10% for the big guy. We've got the receipts. That's ahead on the Vince Coglianese Show. Breaking news today. James Lynch will join us moments from now from the Daily Caller. We'll talk to him about that. Chris Smith is joining us, congressman from New Jersey, at 4 o'clock. As those windmills, you know, the ones that have been killing the whales. We've got an update on that story, a big one. Sheriff Mike Chapman of Loudoun County is here at 4:30 today. We've got another scandal in Loudoun as students at one high school overdosing on drugs like crazy just in the last 3 weeks. Sheriff Chapman was the one who shared it with the public. He'll give us more details today. Sabrina Soffer is a student, a Jewish student at George Washington University, living in a world that is turning on her. She'll explain at 5 o'clock. And at 5:30, Congressman Andy Biggs is with us as Congress contemplates spending more of your money. And he'll react as well to the breaking news today on Joe Biden and how he made all of his. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. This morning, Chairman of the House Oversight Committee, James Comer, releasing brand new information, including a photo of a check. They've actually got the document of $40,000 flowing to Joe Biden through a complex series of companies immediately after the Biden family received $400,000. Now, you do the math there. $40,000 is what percent of $400,000? That's right, 10% for the big guy, ladies and gentlemen. Here's James Comer today. Listen.
Remember when Joe Biden told the American people that his son didn't make any money in China?
My son has not made money in terms of this thing about, what are you talking about, China?
Well, not only did he lie about his son Hunter making money in China, but it also turns out that $40,000 in laundered China money landed in Joe Biden's bank account in the form of a personal check. And the Oversight Committee has it. Here's how Joe Biden benefited from his family's shady deal with CEFC, a Chinese Communist Party-linked company. It all began with a shakedown in the summer of 2017 when Hunter Biden sent a message to his CEFC associate demanding a $10 million capital payment. As Hunter Biden extorted this associate, Hunter claimed he was sitting with his father and that the Biden network would turn on his associate if he didn't pony up the money. The extortion scheme worked. Days later, $5 million flowed in from a Chinese affiliate of CEFC. Over the following 3 weeks, Biden family members made a series of complicated financial transactions to hide the source of the China money. Here's how that happened. First, Northern International Capital, a Chinese company associated with CEFC, wired $5 million to Hudson West 3, a joint venture established by Hunter Biden and a CEFC associate. Then Hudson West 3 sent $400,000 to an entity owned and controlled by Hunter Biden. Next, Hunter Biden wired $150,000 to Lion Hall Group, a company owned by James and Sarah Biden. Sarah Biden then withdrew $50,000 in cash from Lion Hall Group. Later the same day, she deposited it into her and James Biden's personal checking account. A few days later, Sarah Biden cut a check to Joe Biden for $40,000. The memo line of the check said loan repayment. Like the payment to Joe from AmeriCorps funds, it's certainly plausible that this payment where James and Sarah used funds from China was indeed a loan payment to Joe. But even if this $40,000 check was a loan repayment from James Biden, it still shows how Joe benefited from his family cashing in on his name, with money from China no less. Without his family peddling his name and his son threatening a CEFC associate with consequences that he said Joe Biden knew about, James wouldn't have had the money to write the $40,000 check to his brother Joe. It's also worth remembering that Biden family efforts to secure millions from this Chinese company began when Joe Biden was still vice president. In taking funds sourced to a CCP-linked company that wanted to advance China's interests, Joe Biden exposed himself to future blackmail and put America's interests behind his own desire for money.
Yeah, James Comer there. So, and he goes on to say the House Oversight Committee is going to keep digging. For more on this, let's bring in James Lynch, an investigative reporter for the Daily Caller, was involved in breaking this news today. James, good to have you with us, sir.
Thanks for having me, Ben.
This does feel like a huge piece of a story that has a lot of characters and a lot of complex financial arrangements.
Yeah, it's a significant piece of evidence. For a while, the White House was saying that there's no direct evidence Joe Biden was involved with his son's business dealings. Comer proceeded to release a $200,000 check James Biden wrote to Joe Biden. The same day, AmeriCorps, a distressed healthcare company, loaned $200,000 to James Biden. And we know from bankruptcy court documents that AmeriCorps was promised by James Biden that he would use his political connections to secure an investment from the Middle East. So there's the first piece of direct evidence. And now we have a second piece of direct evidence showing not only Joe Biden receiving money from his family members' business dealings, but money directly sent from China to Hunter Biden and then to James Biden and ultimately to Joe Biden.
This is starting to give us some perspective, James, on why the banks that were involved in all of these transactions were throwing up red flags and sending the United States Treasury Department a very unusual number of suspicious activity reports involving Biden family bank accounts.
Yeah, so the banks sent suspicious activity reports showing the Biden family and its associates brought in more than $24 million from foreign sources. And we know this because James Comer said it at the first impeachment inquiry hearing, that up to that point, all of the bank records from the Biden family business enterprise came from suspicious activity reports filed by banks. And I've spent a lot of time looking through the Hunter Biden email archive. Hunter Biden typically worked with Wells Fargo, and James Biden typically worked with PNC Bank. So these are well-known financial institutions. Looking at these payments from foreign companies and sending them to the Treasury Department simply because there were some shady characters involved, such as Burisma in Ukraine and CEFC in China. And so now the Oversight Committee is looking at Hunter and James Biden's personal and corporate bank records to find even more information on the Biden family enterprise. And that's where you get the $40,000 payment from China to Joe Biden, which was 10% of the money that Hunter Biden secured for himself, as you said.
How important is it that that money didn't flow directly to Joe Biden and instead went through a series of organizations with almost forgettable names? I mean, it wouldn't be, unless it was for the fact that we cover it so frequently, I wouldn't remember any of these. Hudson West 3, Owasco PC, Lion Hall Group, Northern International Capital, all of these names of these companies. What does it tell us that we didn't see a check right from this Chinese energy company to Joe Biden?
Yeah, it's an incredibly significant part of the story because it appears to show that the Biden family knew what was going on and they were using LLCs and business arrangements to try to evade scrutiny on the payments from China to Joe Biden. And it also shows the fact that Hunter Biden and James Biden were very closely involved with Chinese companies to the point where they had multiple business entities.
Yes.
Not only do they have Hudson West III, as James Comer mentioned, and Hunter Biden's Owasco account, but Hunter Biden and CEFC also use an account called State Energy HK to take money from China. And so I think the fact that they had all of these entities kind of shows how expansive the Biden family enterprise was.
James Lynch, I was reading through some of the documents that the Oversight Committee released today, and I was struck by one detail, well, a lot of details, but one detail that really stood out to me is that the bank accounts in question were basically zeroed out before the Chinese money came in. It wasn't like there was a bunch of surplus cash sitting in these accounts and such that the Bidens could say, oh, of course, there was tons of money in that account. We sent Joe $40,000, but it had nothing to do with the Chinese business deal. No, there was no money in these accounts. In fact, the only money that was there was what came ultimately from this Chinese company.
Right. So Sarah Biden and James Biden's personal account, which was where Sarah Biden sent Joe Biden the Chinese money from, had about $40 in it before they deposited the $50,000 from China. And as you were saying, the Lion Hall Group, which is the business account used by Sarah and James Biden, most of the money in that account was also the funds from China. And we know that Hunter Biden, at this point, was relying primarily on the foreign money from Ukraine and China and elsewhere just to stay afloat financially, if you look at his emails and you look at the bank records.
Yes.
So you're correct. As you were saying, the Bidens needed the money to come in from these foreign companies just to pay their bills.
Yeah, they sure did. Another piece that I don't know if I knew it per se, but that came to my attention by way of these documents today is that the Chinese energy company was not paying Hunter and James Biden until just 6 weeks after Joe Biden left the vice presidency, although the Bidens were doing all sorts of work for this Chinese company beginning in the summer of 2016. Is that right?
Yeah, you're correct about that. Tony Bobulinski told the FBI in October of 2020, right after the New York Post's reporting, about his role in the Chinese business enterprise with the Bidens. And he explained that the discussions with CEFC began when Joe Biden was vice president. And Hunter and James Biden knew that there could be an appearance of impropriety, so they didn't actually start taking money from CEFC right until Joe Biden left office. We also know about the 10% for the big guy email thread that came out from the New York Post reporting, and that Tony Bobulinski told the FBI was real and legitimate. And that 10% business deal was something that Bobulinski said he discussed with Joe Biden in California after Joe Biden left office. So as you're saying, this began when Joe Biden was vice president, and then it escalated after Joe Biden left office and had meetings with CEFC, according to Rob Walker, who is another Biden business associate.
Yes.
Talked about it with Bobulinski, and then as James Comer said, Hunter Biden threatened his Chinese business associate, and then Hudson West 3 was formed, starting the direction of funds from China.
Boy, we're really starting to color in all the lines now, aren't we, on how all of this works? You've got that March of 2017, so just less than 3 months, within 6 weeks of Biden leaving office, is what they say here. March of 2017, $3 million flows in to the Biden family and their associates. $3 million from this Chinese energy company, CEFC. Rob Walker said it represented a, quote, thank you. It was a thank you gift from CEFC. A thank you is usually something that happens after you deliver the goods that you're supposed to. In other words, the Bidens were getting back pay for all of the work they did while Joe was vice president.
Yeah, and Bobulinski said something similar to the FBI, that the Bidens had been working for CEFC while Joe Biden was in office. And then they started receiving money afterwards when they said to CEFC, look at what we've done for you guys. And now that Joe's out of office, it's time for you guys to pay up. And then obviously, in addition to that, we have Hunter Biden threatening CEFC, saying, look, my father's in the room and you guys better do what we want you to do. And then we have another text message sent shortly thereafter where Hunter Biden bragged to CEFC that the Bidens are the best at doing what CEFC wants. So the pattern of what was going on here is pretty clear. And it appears that the whole thing started with CEFC, the Chinese company, when Joe Biden was still in office.
All right, James Lynch, really just encyclopedic, your knowledge of this saga. We will have you back again soon, sir. Thank you very much. James Lynch, an investigative reporter for the Daily Caller. Thanks, James.
Thanks for having me.
Let's see here. I've got some more audio for you coming up, including all of the things that the various people involved in this arrangement have said over time, from Tony Bobulinski to Joe Biden, all of his lies on this subject, as well as the only reporter, it seems, that has access to the president who even asks questions about this.
I have not taken a penny from any foreign source ever in my life. We learned that this president paid 50 times.
Oh, we need laugh tracks for this, don't we? Just a whole audience of people cracking up.
Times the tax in China, has a secret bank account with China, does business in China.
Oh, my God.
And in fact, is talking about me taking money. I have not taken a single penny from any country whatsoever, ever.
I think Trump had some hats made in China or something. This guy's ridiculous, honestly. Yeah, the big guy is definitely Joe Biden. How do we know that?
In that email, there's a statement where they go through the equity. Jim Biden's referenced as, 10%. Doesn't say Biden, it says Jim. And then it has 10% for the big guy held by H. I 1,000% sit here and know that the big guy is referencing Joe Biden. That's crystal clear to me.
Yeah, it's crystal clear to me. It says Tony Bobulinski, the Biden family business partner who the media have since ignored entirely. Tony who? What? Bobulinski, the name sounds Polish. He's probably a dummy. We're not going to, speaking as a part Pole, I can say that. I'm allowed to do that. This is the way they treat the guy. He's not allowed to, be even represented as a credible witness. Of course, we have a guy on the record making a credible accusation. That's direct evidence, just so everyone's clear. And no, No. There's no evidence, they say. Stephen Nelson is a reporter for the New York Post. Back in June, he asked Joe Biden at a supposed junk fees press conference, Biden is not making your life better in any way. Why does an FBI informant file that says that you were taking bribes from Burisma, why does it refer to you as the big guy, says Stephen Nelson. Here's how Biden flippantly responded.
Why did the Ukraine FBI informant file refer to you as the big guy? Why is that term continuously applied? Thank you very much. Thanks, guys.
Why'd you ask such a dumb question?
Why'd you ask such a dumb question, says Biden after a very pregnant pause so he can process the English language. Why'd the Ukraine FBI informant file refer to you as the big guy? Why'd you ask such a dumb question? Stephen Nelson, also in June, the only reporter in the entire country who's asking these questions, asked Joe as he was leaving for Marine One, hey, were you involved in that shakedown message? Were you actually sitting there next to Hunter?
President Biden, how involved were you in your son's Chinese shakedown text message? Were you sitting there? Were you involved?
No, I wasn't, and I don't.
Were you?
No.
No, I wasn't. Were you? No! He blurts out, no! He starts screaming. And do you notice in that audio that some dummy reporter who's standing there is not letting the guy answer? I watched the video again today to refresh my memory. Biden is staring with that sort of blank bovine look on his face at Stephen Nelson, preparing to answer the question, like, oh, processing. And this reporter's like, what are you going to say to Vladimir Putin? And like in the middle of the guy trying to answer a question that's far more relevant, far more meaningful in terms of just A1, top fold, screaming headline news. You imagine if the fact pattern were the same for, I don't know, let's say Donald John Trump, what we'd be going through right now, primetime hearings. There'd be discussion about how do we get the military to remove him from office? What is it going to take to save our country? This man is bought and paid for by America's enemies. Instead, what we get today, $40,000 check, 10% for the big guy. Unless you're listening to WMAL, it's crickets, baby. Hey, good afternoon to you. 3:35 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up today, Congressman Chris Smith will be with us at 4 o'clock. We'll talk about the insanity of the so-called green movement. Why does it feel like I care way more about the environment than they do? They're killing the whales. I like the whales. The whale killing may end, at least for the moment, temporarily. Those wind farms off the shore of New Jersey. We've got an update for you with the congressman. We've got Sheriff Mike Chapman of Loudoun County joining us today at 4:30. We'll talk about the fentanyl problem in that county. A bunch of high schoolers just overdosing in the last few weeks alone. That news just breaking. We'll talk about it with the sheriff. Sabrina Soffer joins us today, 5 o'clock. She's a Jewish undergrad student at GW University. And Congressman Andy Biggs is here at 5:30. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Now, if I told you I was listening to WMAL all day, every day, that would be a nice thing to say, but I'd be lying. I'd be lying. I do listen to WMAL a lot, though. People are like, how can you listen? I love it. I love my coworkers. These guys have great shows, and they're all different. They're all insightful. They've all got something interesting to say, so I really do love checking in on them. But I also check in on everything else, just so we can, cobble together the show and pick a bunch of content. And among the things that I'm hearing this week are this Elon Musk interview with the comedian and podcaster Joe Rogan. And the two sat down for a couple of hours. I think it was in Texas. I think that's where everybody is now. They've escaped California. And it's kind of fascinating for a number of reasons. One of them is that Elon was talking about this new Tesla truck he has coming out soon. And the one that looks like it's a computer graphic turned into something in real life, like a simple computer car that was turned into an actual production vehicle. And he's bragging that, at least he was bragging on this thing, that it's bulletproof, that they are using such high-grade steel on the vehicle that they are going to be releasing a video soon showing them firing what he refers to as a Tommy gun. They fired he said an Al Capone-style Tommy gun into the side of the vehicle to demonstrate its ability to actually stop bullets, unlike, say, your normal, regular old, you knock on the panel of the car, you can see it flexing on the outside of the vehicle. You're like, that's probably not going to stop a bullet. He claims his truck can. Now, remember, he also claimed that he had durability to the windows on that thing before, and they did that big public demonstration. I think they smashed it with a mallet or something. The windows just shattered. So, rather not sit inside the car for that test. But they said they fire a gun. So one of the things they did is Rogan took, is this the right term? A compound bow. He took one of his hunting bows, and they literally said right now they ran out to the garage at Rogan's compound, and they fired an arrow into the side of the vehicle, and it did leave a tiny little dent on the steel, but other than that, the arrow shattered and the thing fell, and he fired it from pretty close. The kind of thing that normally would kill an animal. Didn't do much damage to the truck. So it's possible, it appears. Now, that vehicle's heavy, too. They say it's about 7,000 pounds. 7,000 pounds on the road. That's a big truck. That's an F-250 fully loaded. That's a lot of weight. Most cars are not anywhere near that, which is partly, it's got to be the steel, but it's also got to be the batteries. These batteries are really heavy in these electric vehicles. Everyone keeps, the left keeps selling them as like the great savior for the environment. That's not true at all. There's nothing true about that at all. One, you've got massive upfront cost, whether you're paying it directly or you're paying it through your taxes and subsidies. There's just massive upfront costs to build these things. Then, of course, you need to generate the energy that charges the vehicle. That's generated with fossil fuels. And then when you get the cars out on the roadway, what's the life cycle? The life cycle on these things? It's nowhere near what the internal combustion engine is. You talk to some guy with a Toyota, he's like, yeah, I've been driving it for 200,000 miles. Have you seen that yet with a Tesla or any of these electric vehicles? I don't think that's happening. You're going to definitely have to replace the battery way before you get to anything like that. And the vehicle weight on the road, you know what that does? 7,000 pounds. You know what that does to tires? You think, what's your tire wear like right now? Your chances are you're not driving a 7,000-pound vehicle. If you are, those tires are gone in no time. Just so much friction and pressure on the road, you're going to have to replace them. Is that the environmental thing? We've been told for years that tires are sort of a problem, haven't we? All these tires we have to dispose of. There's a huge problem for the environment. Okay, so Mr. Electric Vehicle Pusher, what about all these tires we're going to have to dispose of? Anyway, that's all interesting. We'll see what Elon Musk does with it. But the most interesting stuff that he said that I want to share with you now is his experience in taking over this big social media company. He bought Twitter, and thank the good Lord that occurred, because regardless of whatever Elon Musk's shortcomings might be, and trust me, I've been sitting back going, I'm concerned about China and Elon. Elon has a big relationship in China. I'm very concerned about that. Also, he has a lot of baby mamas. Have you noticed? He's got a lot of children by a lot of different women. Not my thing. But Elon has been a big win for free speech. And he says people have no idea how much control the government actually had over that company until he purchased it. Take a listen to this exchange.
What was that like? Because that, to me, that was the most bizarre, was the Twitter files. When you let Schellenberger and Matt Taibbi and all those guys get in the Twitter, and the response where Matt Taibbi gets audited. I mean, which is just wild. I mean, just so blatant.
On the same day that Taibbi was testifying to Congress about the content, the substance of the Twitter files. Do you remember that testimony? Do you remember what they did to him? They spent the whole time trying to figure out, who's your source? Did Elon Musk give it to you directly? The Democrats, The Democrats, part of the censorship industrial complex, they were so agitated that Matt Taibbi, a talented reporter, was involved in exposing it. So they wanted to undermine him. They were literally looking for the soft spots in his armor. They just wanted to fillet this guy. And meanwhile, while they were attempting to do that within Congress, the IRS was banging on his door. Is Matt Taibbi home? Sending a message.
So in your face.
Yeah, it's weird. No, I mean, the degree to which, and by the way, Jack didn't really know this, but the degree to which Twitter was simply...
Jack Dorsey is who he's referring to. Jack Dorsey's a weird character, isn't he? You see that guy? Kind of like strange. You can almost smell him when you'll see him. You see the photo, you're like, I know what that guy smells like. A lot of weed. He's just got this big beard and earrings all over the place. And then all of these scandals, he's the former head of Twitter. All of these scandals, it was always like, I had no idea that was going on. Well, yeah, because you were high the whole time. There are people all around you who were driving the company into the ground, censoring everybody, and you had no idea what was going on? If that's true, you are out of it, dude.
Know this, but the degree to which Twitter was simply an arm of the government was not well understood by the public. And it was whatever the official government, I mean, it was like Pravda, basically. It's a state publication is the way to think of old Twitter. It's a state publication.
And was the justification from their perspective that they are progressive liberals, they have the right intentions, it's important that they stay in power, the progressive liberals stay in government and power because this is their...
There was basically oppression of any views that would even, I would say, be considered middle of the road. But certainly anything on the right. I'm not talking about like far right. I'm just talking mildly right. The people like Republicans were suppressed at 10 times the rate of Democrats.
You want to dwell on that point for a moment? That data point? Republicans were suppressed at 10 times the rate of Democrats. Now, when I heard him say that, my first thought was, and Rogan didn't ask the follow-up on that specifically. I was like, is that hyperbole or is that a specific data point? Elon has a very sort of computer-esque way about him, so my guess is that he was citing a specific internal data point that they were able to assess. But regardless, he's conveying an important message. Yeah, all the censorship was against the right. It was all against the right. And if we had a functioning news media, one that actually looked out for the interests of the little guy, like if they responsibly used the rights that are enshrined in the First Amendment, then this would have been dealt with a long time ago. But instead, what did the New York Times do during this whole saga? And it still does to this day. Oh, the right's not censored. In fact, right-wing content is seen way more than left-wing content on the internet. There's no credibility to these claims, and blah, blah, blah. They go on and on and on. And it is always, everything is deception. I'm telling you, it is just deception, especially on data like that. There's a New York Times guy, I think his name is Kevin Roose. I think that's his name, Kevin Roose. And he's been involved. Let me verify as I'm talking to you here. Yeah, New York Times. So for a time, I don't know if he still does this, but he would always tweet these little graphics that were like, look at this. Dan Bongino and Ben Shapiro, great WMAL hosts, Dan Bongino and Ben Shapiro, they have the most traffic on Facebook right now on their individual posts. And way behind them, places like New York Times, MSNBC, and on and on and on. And he's go, see, that is proof that this social media company is not censoring the right. Well, first of all, no, it's not proof of that or really almost anything. It's proof that Dan Bongino and Ben Shapiro have wildly successful individual posts. That's true. But if you were being honest about what's going on here, and you're not, and you were going to do like an actual data analysis, how many people, how many pages all across Facebook, how many posts all across Facebook are saying the same thing, the same exact thing that Ben Shapiro is saying in that post right now? How many? How many that people have access to? What is it, 5? There's 5 pages across all of Facebook that have the same opinion, right? Like Ben Shapiro going after some woke nonsense on a college campus. How many posts from prominent outlets sound like that? Almost none of them. This is like a simple economic formula, actually. There is a massive demand for the Ben Shapiro opinion and limited supply of the Ben Shapiro opinion. Of course that post is going to be doing like gangbusters, even in an environment with a dramatic amount of censorship for anybody else who sounds like Ben Shapiro. Meanwhile, where do you go to find an opinion that you find on the New York Times? So the New York Times posts an opinion. Climate change is a real threat to your life. How many places are expressing that? Well, I don't know. All of them? Every single one? The whole media reading from the same damn song sheet on all of these stories? You have there's a school shooting goes down. CNN, MSNBC, the New York Times, the LA Times, the Washington Post, they all sound the same exact way. Assault weapons ban. When are we going to do this? Blah, blah, blah. It's like the same exact news cycle all the time for these people. Of course, those posts are on an individual level are not going to perform well compared to Dan Bongino ripping apart the latest Biden scandal. It's not going to, it'll never come close. In a fair fight, one where there's no censorship, can you imagine how well those posts would do? It'd be bananas. So it was always, this is like fun with data. They're like constantly lying to you. But look, we don't even need to rely on this outside interpretation where Kevin Roose at the New York Times can stare at some data and go, well, look at Dan Bongino. He's performing so well. Or me, for that matter, just looking at this going, hey, here's what's really going on. This is what I think I'm seeing based on this exterior data. We don't need that sitting on the outside. You've got Elon Musk, who just bought the biggest collection of information on this subject that any human being has ever purchased. And he's reporting to you first through the hands of a bunch of really responsible, careful, thoughtful reporters, people like Michael Schellenberger and Matt Taibbi. And then subsequently on his own, he goes on this podcast and he says, yeah, Republicans were suppressed on this platform 10 times as much as Democrats. This is also not the first time we've heard it from a tech executive talking about this particular phenomenon. They all talk about it differently. But that other robot, Mark Zuckerberg, remember him? Remember he goes and he sits down. It was also with Joe Rogan. He said this, he gave a version of this. He said, yeah, the FBI was warming us up for months on Hunter Biden. Yeah, they were telling us, be on guard. There's going to be a massive drop of information. One of them said it was about Hunter Biden. And sure enough, what happens? The New York Post story comes out. Massive revelations, massive implications about the possibility of a Biden presidency. To what extent is he compromised? And the social media companies act swiftly at the behest of the federal government. Mark Zuckerberg laid all this out. He said this really happened. And our media, because they agree with the political outcome, they either refuse to talk about these stories, like what Elon's saying here or what Mark Zuckerberg said in the past, or they downplay them. They're like, oh, well, whatever. Look, it had all the makings of Russian disinformation, so they were right to be on guard. 2016, you see, when the Russians stole the election, they still believe this. The Russians stole the election for Trump. That was justification enough to be on guard and to protect the American people from being able to have open and honest conversations. We can't allow that, even though what happened last time. It's truly crazy, but you should know about it. I'm glad Elon did this. I'm glad he's telling us about it. I mean, I guess you can assume that somebody tastes the food for the presidents of the United States. I'm reading from an old piece from my colleagues at the Daily Caller. This is 2013. Obama couldn't eat at Hill meeting without a food taster. Did you know about this? Following President Obama's lunch meeting with Senate Republicans on Capitol Hill, Maine Republican Senator Susan Collins described the food served and said the president was not able to eat since his food taster was not present. What did they think was going to happen? He couldn't eat the food that the Senate Republicans were eating? They really thought they were going to poison him. What did he think they were? Democrats? There's a bunch of Senate Republicans. Susan Collins was present. You're fine. Don't worry. University of Maine recipe for healthy lobster salad. I pointed that out to the president in keeping with the First Lady's initiatives, and Fox family potato chips made in Aroostook County, where I'm from, and wild blueberry pie full of antioxidants. See, this was a healthy lunch as well. We did have a little ice cream on the pie, too, also made in Maine, Gifford's ice cream. So in all seriousness, this was well received. Collins told reporters after the meeting at the Capitol. Unfortunately, the president can't, said Collins when asked if Obama ate at the lunch meeting. He looked longingly at it, she said. He honestly did, but apparently he has to have essentially a taster. I pointed out to him, we were all tasters for him. That if the food had been poisoned, all of us would have been keeled over. But he did longingly look at it. He probably said something next like, Michelle won't let me eat this kind of stuff. Like ice cream. It's 3:58.